AWP Voices, your People Promise in action.
Welcome to AWP Voices, the very first episode of our monthly podcast series, with me, Steve Walker, and Katie McManus. Every month we'll be sharing examples of best practice and innovation from teams across our trust on AWP Voices. We'll be demonstrating how we're meeting the 7 values of the People Promise programme, and also how AWP is a great place to work for our staff and also to receive care as a service user. In a moment, I'll be talking to Neil Bennett, AWP's Leadership and Management Development Manager, about leadership and how we can all be better leaders. But first, here's Katie McManus, our People Promise Programme Manager, to tell us about the People Promise.
Hi Steve, thanks for having me here today. So the aim of this programme is to put our 7 people promises into action, as you say. So we want to turn them from a list into something that's visible, something that people can see and feel. So when they do come to work, they feel valued, they feel respected, and they know that they're working for an organisation that thinks that they're important and wants to do their best for them. So the programme is running initially for 12 months. We're sort of in month 4 now. And we've moved past our planning stage and we're now into the stage of the programme where we have 8 projects about to go live. And each of those projects is aiming to achieve at least one of the people promises. So if anyone wants to know more about what these are, they can go to our space, and we've got a page set up for every project telling you more. There's details there about how you can get involved and what we're hoping to achieve from each thing. But more importantly, what we want is, as time goes on through this year, for people to see and to feel the difference that this work is making. So when they do reflect on their time at work and whether they're having a great experience, more people are saying yes. More people are saying, I love working at AWP. I would recommend it as somewhere to other people. It's an organisation that cares. It's an organisation that puts me first. And as I say, that's ultimately what we're aiming to achieve by this. And there's more to come. Each of the subsequent episodes in this series will be welcoming different guests from different areas of the trust to talk about their work and what it means to them and how the people promises are happening in real life, how they look when they're in action.
Thank you, Katie. Neil Bennett joined AWP in April of 2024 as our Leadership and Management Development Manager. So, Neil, how did your journey towards AWP and your current role begin?
Well, this was a marvellous opportunity that I jumped at. Leadership is my passion. I love the whole people spectrum, and leadership is so important, so many different aspects of our working lives. I actually started life out in the Royal Marines. And then after a number of tours where I was away, especially when I had a young family, I decided to move into teaching and into leadership. And I went all over the world, into Africa, the Middle East, North America, and then Europe and UK, teaching leadership to thousands and thousands of leaders and managers. And that really ignited further my passion for getting to understand it, but also to develop people and help empower them to discover this very used word, leadership, that so many of us contest and wrestle with actually understanding what does it mean on a day-to-day basis.
So can the military, is that a good example of a place that can actually help you to learn to lead or mould your leadership skills?
Yeah, I think so. And I think before people think, what can the military help with the NHS? Actually, we're both working on front lines. We're both working in people's lives. And I look at, wards and what people do there. And is that so different to when I was doing 3-block war fighting in one corner of a block, round the corner doing peacekeeping or delivering humanitarian aid in another? On a ward, people might be saving a life at one end of it, managing a family at the other, and in between delivering care to other patients. So I think there are many aspects where we can share and learn from one another in order to find that best practice.
So when we talk about leadership nowadays, what do we actually mean?
That's a fantastic question, and one, we've been wrestling with for centuries, if not decades. I mean, leadership has been around for thousands and thousands of years. And before I answer that, what I normally say to people is, well, what's the one word that pops into your head? So when you say leadership, Steve, what's the one word that comes immediately to mind? And as for our listeners too, what's the one word that comes to mind when we say that big word, leadership?
It's a good question, isn't it? But I would imagine for me it would be about developing strategies and saying, here's a horizon. This is where our service, whatever service we're delivering, is going to reach. So this is where I want my team to be in the future. This is our vision. This is how we're going to get there. So it's molding perhaps a strategic framework of how we're going to deliver the service. Not quite so much about how we're going to deliver the day-to-day mechanics of the operation, but the general higher level vision of where we're going to go. And I guess people might ask, what's the difference between management and leadership?
And that's a great answer that you just gave. And then I would say to you, well, think of that role model. I think coming back to your point, so for me, there is the leadership vision and action, and there is the action of linking that strategy at the top that then drives and directs people to do their day-to-day business in order to support that. And within that, you've got that tussle of leadership and management, arguably two sides of a very important coin in most organisations. And for me, if we take the sort of a simplistic answer to that, leadership very much about the people and the turbulence, and we can come back to that, but people and the turbulence, whereas management much more to do with the stuff and numbers. And most people who comment on this very much see, leaders are there to help with that vision, that strategy, to understand where the power, who's going to be doing what. Whereas management tends to be more focused on those processes, on the solutions, standard operating procedures, but also how do you leverage all the resources that you have, from your people and their skill sets to your budgets, to your infrastructure, to your kit, to your equipment, and whatever else you have at your disposal, in order to achieve what the leader sets out in their vision, mission, and the meaning and the values that they then want to bring forward to help motivate and inspire everyone to do their job.
And of course, some people say that leaders are born and not made. So is leadership something that can be learned?
That's almost like the oldest face of leadership, and the two faces, that whole nurture versus nature, where on the one hand, what's exclusive to you and me that makes us leaders, but also what's inclusive that allows everyone to be leaders. So I very much take it that everyone can be leaders. And can it be learned? Yeah, definitely. Can it be learned from a book? Probably not. And that's where we need to use things like immersive learning, experiential learning, increasingly in this modern, wonderful world of ours, modelling and simulation, to help our emerging and new leaders, as well as existing ones, to develop themselves to be the optimal leaders and managers that they can be. But definitely can be learned. Otherwise, I'm out of a job.
But isn't it the case that at the turn of the century, the turn of the 19th century into the early 20th century, we had trade theories that were advocating just that leadership was a skill that you either had, you were born with, or it wasn't something you could be learnt. And as we got into the 1960s and beyond, and into our current time, leadership theories have become a bit more enlightened as the world has become more complex, and it's recognised now that everybody can step up to be a leader. Yeah,
I mean, everybody, some people might sort of contest that, but I think that's important. And what you say is very, so well done for doing your research. And what I'd say there is, when we started off looking at the views of leadership, the schools of leadership, it very much did start with personal leadership. And that's what everybody can bring on a day-to-day basis, their personal self, both the exclusive parts of them and the inclusive, which everybody shares. But then as we move along into the 20th century, we developed team leadership post-World War I. So again, how do you get your team to work as a team and optimize their performance? And then we have organizational leadership. And those three, personal, team, and organizational, are very much seen as the traditional, as you alluded to, views of leadership. But today, we've got the slightly more provocative views of leadership, where we're looking at political leadership, power, this thing that we wrestle with, influence, and how that determines the actions that we all undertake. But then visionary leadership, and you think of people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and how amazing they had a vision back in the sort of 80s and where they are today for their organisations. And then increasingly, we have ethical leadership where we're bringing our values. And you can look at that on a grand scale to think about our planet, but also in most organisations now, they're really trying to push what is our purpose. Even in the business world, it's gone beyond a profit. So I think you're bringing all of that. And it's not a case of one view now replaces. And I think this is where potentially people go wrong. It's a blend of all those. So our leaders and managers are bringing that personal, team, organisational, power, visionary, ethical, all together into the workplace, whether they're acting as the chief exec at the top and doing that vision and strategy as you alluded to, or whether they're in our wards delivering our day-to-day frontline leadership.
So it's leadership for managers or supervisors, or can anyone in the team actually lead?
Oh yeah, no, thank you. That's a brilliant question. Well, I'll give you my sort of favourite quote, which also goes back to answering that, your original question. And this quote is, "Leadership is a catalytic process that can accomplish what leaders cannot." I'll just say it again. Leadership is a catalytic process that can accomplish what leaders cannot. Now, they're not my words. They're actually from the UN office in Geneva, as well as the World Academy of Art and Science. But I go, there is so much happening now for our leaders and managers, and so much change that is happening so quickly that if we don't have leadership, you kind of get left behind. And that's where I feel everyone can contribute and needs to contribute. When I was in Africa, I studied the indigenous peoples, and they don't really have a word leader. What they believe is that the right person with the right skills will step forward at the right time with the right solution and lead whatever needs leading. And then once that's done, they'll go back into the tribe. And I think that's a smart way for seeing that leadership is sort of bigger than leaders. And the most important aspect of leadership is you need leaders and followers. No followers, there's no leadership. And arguably the first follower is like the first leader, as they sort of encourage everyone to come alongside.
What are the signs of a good leader?
I think ultimately for me, and to narrow it down and give it some focus, is a leader brings clarity, unity, alignment and empowerment, and in so doing with that creates an environment where others can flourish, where others feel that they're included, that they can contribute and even challenge. And I think that's really important. I mean, there comes a point, obviously, where we've all got to march in the same direction and work together. But we need to make sure we hear our voices. And indeed, that's a part of the People Promise, because otherwise we're not engaging and we're not making sure we get the very best from our talented people. So I think there are various qualities, but I also encourage people, who do you think is a good leader? Or who do you think is a bad leader or even toxic? Because sometimes you can learn what you don't want to be or what isn't good and apply it to yourself as well as in developing others. Because whilst I'm the leadership and management development manager, actually the responsible for developing leadership and management in AWP is the responsibility of all leaders and managers, whatever level they're at.
So how can you spot a bad leader?
Well, God, that's a good question. You almost sort of like spin it and go, how can you spot an effective leader? I think you're going to be misaligned. And I think that's the key thing. So if we were to come back to, what makes a good leader, it's the alignment. And therefore in a bad leader, there's going to be misalignment. And if you think about, as people, we can hear 50% of what we hear, but we only understand 50% of that. We only believe 50% of that, and then we remember 50% of that. So actually, that's only 6.25%. And so if you don't align your people, you're going to have a lot of misalignment, and that's going to manifest itself in bad and or negative ways in the workplace. And therefore, I think that misalignment where people don't necessarily know, what is your current reality? Why are we doing this? What is the goal of this particular task? Who's doing what? How are we going to do it? What resources have we got? And if people don't know those fundamentals, they won't be aligned to actually achieving the fulfillment of the task.
So I guess whatever stage you're at in your career, are there ways in which you can become a better leader?
Oh, definitely. Whether you're emerging as a future leader or manager, or whether you're a senior manager or even on the board, there's always opportunity to learn and to develop oneself, by more understanding oneself and how you interrelate, with others. But also, for me, the leadership coin has two sides. It's action and influence. And the more you understand action and influence, you're more likely to be able to actually do this big word called leadership.
Now, here at AWP, teams often have an hour for, once a month set aside for self-development. Would you be happy to perhaps participate in some of those sessions to perhaps support leadership development?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and that's what I love doing. It's getting out there, it's getting involved, but also helping people. A lot of people might have fear. They might think, I'm not quite sure what leadership is, or, and then there's this Neil Bennett, and he's the leadership and management development manager. But I'm here to help empower people, to help them understand better what is leadership and or management, and how they can develop it in order that they can be both better leaders and managers, but also that their teams, that they understand their teams and can take their teams that may well be a working group or a potential team or a pseudo team, and take it to those higher levels of being a real team, or even better, a high performing team. And we can play around with everything. Rockets, I can bring some rockets along and we can play around with that, and very much about edutainment. It's about having fun while learning, but importantly delivering an outcome whereby I come back to that quote: leadership is a catalytic process that can accomplish what leaders cannot. So, don't be out there on your own thinking as a leader you've got to know all the answers and be able to do everything. The smart leaders are the ones who bring others alongside in order to help them to actually deliver a better leadership and management effect.
And what's the best way for people to get in touch?
Well, by email, so that's easily done on the system, or by phone, whichever means you can. Contact me. I'm here, and I'm here to help as much as I can. So,
and your email address is?
My email address is n.bennett13@nhs.net.
Neil Bennett, AWP's Leadership and Management Development Manager. Thank you. If you or your team would like to take part in AWP Voices, please contact Katie McManus, and you can reach her via email at katie.mcmanus1@nhs.net. And we'll be back again in August.